Welcome to the Divorce and Your Money Show. I'm your host, Sean Lehman. I'm a financial advisor, MBA, and certified divorce financial analyst, and author of the book, Divorce and Your Money, The No-Nonsense Guide. My mission is to help you make smart financial decisions during one of the most difficult periods in your life. You can visit our website at divorceandyourmoney.com or email me at Sean, that's SHAWN, at divorceandyourmoney.com. We've helped hundreds of people through this show and hope to help thousands more. In this episode, we're discussing trusts. Trusts are legal trusts is what we're talking about, and they're often used for things like estate planning and asset protection. Now, today's episode's a little bit of a niche subject, and not everyone has a trust. But you might have one, or you might be married to someone who has one. And if you're calling from a major metropolitan area like New York or Los Angeles or Dallas or Miami, trusts or trust funds, as some people call them, are actually pretty common. You might have a trust of your own, you might be married to someone who has one, or you know someone who has one. And when it comes to divorce and a trust, there are some things that you need to know. Trusts are not shady or secretive. They serve a purpose, and they can be used for a variety of things. Trust can be used for things like gifting, asset management, tax shelters, or protection from creditors. And so this might be very valuable information for you. And I'm going to start by explaining what a trust is. It's a very specific legal vehicle, but I don't want to talk really about the legal definition. I'm going to try and convert it to plain English and make it as simple as possible. Basically, what the trust is, someone puts money or other assets into this legal vehicle, as I call it, called a trust. It's ultimately, when I say legal vehicle, it has a different legal status, but it's just a bunch of words on a piece of paper that create this legal structure. And the person who gives money or assets to the trust is called the grantor, the donor, so to speak. And the person who receives the benefit from the trust, be it income or assets later down the line or distributions, is called the beneficiary. And then there's a third person involved with the trust called the trustee, and that person is in charge of managing the assets in the trust. So if you have a bunch of investments in the trust, the trustee is in charge of making the best investment decisions they can for the benefit of the beneficiary. And so it could be the case that you are the beneficiary of a trust, or your spouse maybe is the beneficiary of a trust. And so maybe you get monthly or quarterly or yearly distributions from that trust in the form of income or a set percentage or a set formula that helps you live. You can use the money in many cases for whatever you want. Sometimes it's for specific expenses or maybe just for a house, but maybe you benefit from the money that is in that trust. And so when it comes to divorce, a trust is another thing that you have to think about splitting, and what you need to know and what you need to do with it. And so when it comes to divorce, one of the most important things that happens when it comes to trust is you really need to go through the legal language of a trust. And as I said, a trust is ultimately just a document, a set of papers, but it sets up some very specific legal structures to them. And this is something that you have to have an attorney that understands trusts to look at them. But the language in a trust can be very, very specific or pretty broad. And there are many different types of trusts, and you need to understand what kind of trust you are dealing with. And the important thing when it comes to divorce, the real important language is the way that the trust is worded when it comes to the beneficiary. Now, many trusts are worded to really prevent there being a fight in the event of a divorce scenario. A well-worded trust is explicit, almost to the point where it says that the money in this trust is only for the beneficiary. So if your spouse has the trust, it will say, this money or these assets in this trust are only and exclusively for the benefit of your spouse whenever it was set up. Or if it was for you, it might say it was only for your use. And they might have language around it, and oftentimes they have language around it, where it's basically saying that if you are no longer with the beneficiary of the trust, you don't get any access to the money in that trust. Just the person who it's intended for. So what does that mean? It means that if you have a well-worded trust, it is unlikely, if you're the beneficiary, I should say, of a well-worded trust, it is unlikely that your spouse will have any claim to those assets. Now, if your spouse has the trust and it's set up by some really good attorneys, you won't have any access to those assets. It's not always the case, but if you have good attorneys involved, they are well aware of how common divorce is and generally word trusts in a way that it is protected in a divorce situation. The other reason, as it comes to divorce, it's hard for the spouse who is not part of the trust to access it. It's just the way that trusts work. This is a little bit confusing and a little bit philosophical, but let's just say that your spouse benefits from the trust. Well, in many types of trust, even though your spouse benefits from the trust, they don't actually own the trust. It's not an asset of theirs. They get to reap the benefits, but they don't own it, and therefore they can't sell it, and you can't take it because it's not theirs in the first place. They just kind of get the benefits from it. And so it's the trustee of the trust, the person who manages the assets, who you might call the owner. But that's oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes not your spouse, if your spouse is getting the benefits or the beneficiary of a trust. So it's something to think about. And your spouse might have no control over how much money comes out of the trust on a given year or what kind of benefits they receive in any given time period. They might have very limited control over that, and it's all up to the trustee. In other cases, maybe they're involved in that decision, but in any case, you need to know that it's not really their asset. Even though they get all the benefits from it, they don't own it from a legal standpoint in many cases. Now, that's not universal. And as I said, there are dozens of different types of trust, and it really depends on the unique trust document. So I can't give explicit information for your situation. And this is one of those areas that's really confusing, and you need an attorney to look through. But let's boil it down to where we are. It's a complex area. I'm going to provide a little intermission summary. So here's what we got. There's two elements when we're thinking about divorce. One is the trust language. Generally speaking, a well-written trust, if you have good attorneys, or the person who set up the trust had good attorneys, will only be for the beneficiary. So if your spouse is the beneficiary of the trust, then it's not going to be something you can fight over. If you're the beneficiary of the trust, it's usually worded, at least a well-worded one says that you are only the one who can benefit from it, not a potential spouse, for the very reason of divorce. And second is the beneficiary oftentimes does not even own the trust or have control over the trust, and therefore it's not something that you can divide. They don't have ownership of it, they just kind of get the benefits from it. Which gets me to the point. Even though you may have benefited from a trust, both you and your spouse benefited from a trust during marriage, it does not mean that you both get to benefit or even use it in the calculations when you're thinking about divorce. Now, this situation gets even more complicated because depending upon your state, some states will say, well, even though the trust assets are not something you can divide, we are going to calculate the income that's received from the marriage, or at least during the marriage from the trust, and use them to offset or to add to spousal support or child support payments. And so they might factor in what kind of income a trust generates in order to determine how much child support someone might be paying or receiving. And so that really depends. That's a very state-by-state basis. And that's something that with some good legal and financial help, you'll be able to figure out the rules in your state and figure out how that's calculated and if the income from a trust will have any effect on your divorce. Now, trusts are a unique legal issue. And it adds a layer of complexity to your divorce settlement. And if your spouse has a trust, don't automatically assume that you'll be getting some of it in the event of divorce. And if you have a trust, don't necessarily assume that your spouse is going to be able to fight over it in the event of divorce. Well-structured trusts are there to protect the beneficiary, particularly in the event of something like a divorce. But as always, you need to consult your attorney and get good legal help when it comes to the issue of a trust. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Divorce and Your Money Show. Before you go, I want to make sure that there's a few resources that you do not miss. You should visit our website, divorceandyourmoney.com. It has great resources for you. You can sign up for the newsletter, which gives you exclusive updates and content you won't find anywhere else. You can get my book, Divorce and Your Money, The No-Nonsense Guide. There's a link on the website. The book is available on Amazon. It walks through the complicated financial issues in divorce in an easy-to-read way, and there are checklists at the end of each chapter to help you stay focused and on target. Also, I offer one-on-one coaching services to help with the financial issues in your divorce. So if there's a specific subject you have questions about, or you really want to dig deep into a particular financial topic, you can contact me on the divorceandyourmoney.com website. Click on the coaching page, and I will be there to help you. You can also email me with questions at Shawn, that's SHAWN, at divorceandyourmoney.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Leave a 5-star review, which helps other people discover this podcast, and share it with a friend. Word of mouth is one of the most powerful ways to help others. I'm your host. I'm Shawn Lehman, financial advisor, MBA, certified divorce financial analyst, and I'm here to help you during one of the most difficult time periods of your life. Thank you for listening.
I'm on top of the world, now I'm living, and the good just gets better, keeps on giving, not even close to the